Yes, that's his financial issue, right?
Yeah, I don't know how much has changed since he gave it to me, but
It's possible. Well, no, I have that same one. October
I gave it to
23rd.
We are on the air.
Yep.
What's that?
Fairly late, yeah, so she's
gonna try.
she's still gonna try, yeah.
Should go.
I think Ally is.
Beer emergency.
Right, and that's kind of what I'm gonna say is,
I
well,
think
it's an incentive for the town, what's tough, and I'll kind of explain it is, we can't get it unless we have a really good collaboration with him, because we need him to turn in all the paperwork on time, we need a schedule, so.
Tim?
No.
It's really a major problem.
Hey, Tim, did Pete ask you about the utilities?
Get money out of it when I'm putting
Oh,
money
for the door, for the doors.
This gets kind of.
Remember you said you were gonna order
Yeah,
one, or
right.
you might have had one, you did?
It's not in yet.
Oh,
Yeah, well, my part's just applying for the
all right.
grant.
I
He
didn't
didn't ask
see
me,
Pete.
but I told him.
Oh, I didn't see
So
it.
that was days ago.
Turn money
Oh,
back
really?
over, but
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was when he was down doing the lighting. It was there.
Oh,
it'll be
I
up
said
to
I
them
did
to
order
decide.
that. I said it hasn't come in yet. Well, they haven't told me.
He comes back, he's like, oh, what? What do you mean it's broken? It's like a month old.
8 hours.
Yeah, of course.
But at least it's ready now.
Right.
The funny part about it is all the
How
swearing.
you feeling?
Oh, really?
I can't get goddamn door and everything. I said, Pete, give me a
I
goddamn.
heard.
Take it over, put it to a better. The thing don't work.
So then I was like,
I got,
I said, Pete, there's like a magnet switch on the top, so I grabbed the magnet and we hook it up. It was only,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's
sitting right
it
outside.
plugs right into the
Perfect.
US.
So I'll know where to find you.
yeah, they did have that, but not for the newer.
Because they make them for the new super coats.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Oh, no, that
Yeah,
works
when I put
perfect.
an F-150 Lightning, it came up with this
But the
box.
lightning might be a ton of lightning might be
Yeah, because when Pete said that, we had to buy a light, I'm like, he's like, no, you're not, I ran the wire, I got the switch, I got the...
He took everything from my shop. It's just rated. I'm like,
He goes, I had the dash strip apart, I'm like, really?
oh, yeah, that was another thing. I had to break open my toolbox. You weren't into the side tools out.
Yeah.
And he was, I hate you with this. So you have like 2 hours in my time.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And still no light.
And still no light. In the end, I was laughing. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, I never would have thought to check that light.
Yeah, that'll be better. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I put it in already.
It's pretty nice in that truck not having to wait
Oh,
for
the location, yep.
Get some right away.
The new,
I believe so.
say the new diesels do, they have electric heat.
Oh, really?
It
I
takes so
honestly
long
can't
for the
remember
trucks
what
to
else
warm
is on
up.
the
Yeah.
but I think that there was some
That would be
business
nice, but no, he doesn't.
I mean, that's why the trucks are under.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So am I.
Wash your truck. You can't get it.
You start working on my spray bar for
Yeah,
it?
you
Yeah.
have to change the oil. What?
My spray bar that I wanted to make.
I have a sticker on it.
Yeah, spray bar.
Yeah,
was working
I
on
asked him
that.
Oh, yeah. So that's his next project.
First one.
For undercarriage, yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
I know.
It's probably like $100.
Very cool.
All right, good evening,
Yeah,
everybody.
he can make it.
Welcome to our select board meeting for February 6th. Tyler Ward, with me our fellow select board members Bill Kennedy and Bill Taylor. We have Nicole McStay here, town administrator, and Allie Kreutz is off-site taking minutes. Tim Brezovic has us on air the whole time we were here. Everything you guys said was happening on air while we were 5 minutes into this. Tonight's agenda, well, we had our non-public session. Danica Melone and Jeff Lefkovich from Catholic Charities, who's joining us virtually, are here to discuss the InvestNH Hampshire per unit grant for the project up on Bose Farm Road. We have some new business, the revised Peterborough-Sharon policing contract, and then we have some minutes to approve for January 17th. And then at 5:30, we'll have a joint budget committee meeting with the budget committee, obviously, and then we'll discuss the police budget, public works budget, and vote to approve some minutes from 17th as well. So, thank you for your patience, and welcome Danica and Jeff.
Thank you. So yes, I have Jeff Lefkovich on my laptop over here. I'll scoot him forward a little bit. And he's got a nice speaker attached, so Jeff, you should be facing them okay, be able to see them.
Yeah.
Perfect. You guys hear him okay?
Yes.
So why we're here is really kind of twofold. The first is permission to apply for an InvestNH municipal per unit grant. So I was here a couple weeks ago to ask for the Invest New Hampshire demo grant. InvestNH had two grants that they came out with. One was the demo grant, one was the municipal per unit grant cycle. The municipal per unit grant allows the town to apply for up to $10,000 per unit of affordable housing that's approved. There's quite a bit of stipulations in terms of timelines, of town approvals, including building permits being approved during a certain time period. But essentially, if all of that's completed, there's a cap of $1 million that the town is eligible to receive. So for this application, Jeff's project allows the town to be eligible for a total of $670,000. So we'd like to apply for that. However, because there needs to be a collaboration between the town and the applicant in order to submit paperwork on time and be able to receive the funds, Jeff would like to have a discussion with the select board to see if there might be interest in turning funds back over to him to help offset the budget for this project.
Say that again. The last sentence.
So this project would make the town eligible for a total of $670,000, $10,000 for 67 units. But because there has to be a collaboration between the applicant and the town in order to meet certain deadlines, like we need Jeff to submit permits in a certain time period, we think it's reasonable that he wants to have the discussion with the select board to see if there'd be interest in turning those funds back over to him to help offset the project. So for instance, we've had other workforce housing developments be approved, like CD Halliday's, which got us 3 units of workforce housing, but we've been unable to apply for those funds because we can't work with them to submit paperwork on time, meet certain deadlines that would make us otherwise eligible for this grant.
So the funds would come to the town
Yes.
and then be transferred.
Could be, and so Jeff had a couple thoughts, and I'll let him share all of that information, but he had some thoughts about how that could work. But that's kind of my portion of it in terms of the request to apply for the funds, but I'll turn it over to Jeff to explain his portion of that.
Sure, yeah, that's great. And we actually, in our packet, you shared some information about the timeline already with planning board approvals and that sort of thing. So it looks like they're moving ahead on target. So yeah, welcome Jeff, thanks. Hi.
Hi, good evening. So yes, and actually just a slight correction. Phase 1 is 64 units, or be 640,000. So we automatically save you $30,000. This is an important component for us. We received conditional financing reservation from New Hampshire Housing. The tax credits that would be allocated to this project, along with the tax exempt bonds, which would be coming from the Housing Authority, and subsidies, makes up 85% of the project budget. Wow. The New Hampshire, or rather the Invest New Hampshire per unit grant, that would make up the 3% of the remaining 15%. We are applying to other grant-making organizations for another 7%, and we are deferring 5%, or about half of what would be allocated for program and 15-year management costs. So the idea here was there was a couple of ways that we could approach handling the InvestNH Hampshire funds. We could do it a couple of ways that makes most sense to you folks and what's most comfortable. We can, we can assume the funds and apply them for hard costs, or the town keeps the funds and we submit basically draw requests, so you know exactly, and we would do this either way. We would show you exactly where these funds are going, what items the funds are being used for, so you would have an accounting as to how that money was used. So you know that it went specifically for this project. So we can work in both ways. We can manage the funds ourselves and still provide reports back to you, or we would submit draw requests from the town to pay for these items. And we hope that we will be able to break ground either June or July. So we are well within the time period that the program is looking for. We expect to have our construction documents completed by April, bigger permits by May, financing, construction financing by May or June. So that's why I'm looking at a June, July period for commencement of the phase 1 construction. And then also in June, I will be applying for financing for phase 2. Phase 2 is the repurposing of the vacant office complex that's on the property that would bring on another 32 apartment units. And we would be making applications for the same funding programs.
Do we have models, comparable models to what he suggested?
Never done this before.
We've never done this before? The way the state works, we pay and we bill, right? Guess that mechanism protects us. It protects the state, actually, not us. So that is the comparable model, at least in my mind.
I can certainly work with Lily to get an idea of what her preferred method would be, if that's something the board was interested in pursuing.
Well, I'm very interested in pursuing this because I think whatever we can do to help this project, I think is appropriate. We need this. I just want to make sure that we're covering all our bases.
Yeah, I would agree, and I prefer that option as well, where unless it becomes too onerous for the town to be managing 64 units and then possibly another 30 if they have a similar option with another grant. But it does protect the people who are giving this money. Then we're checking on it.
Right.
And ultimately, Tim, would it be tied to Tim's checking of permits and inspections?
It would be.
Or would it-
Yeah, it would be a couple different things. So I know that there's a general phasing plan for this in terms of what Jeff's plan is for where he's going to start the work and where it'll finish. But in order to submit this application, one of the things that they'll look for is a memorandum of understanding between us and this applicant, saying that he will need to expend the funds appropriately for the purposes defined within the grant, and otherwise pay penalties if not. So there's some creativity in terms of how that money can go back to him, but I'm happy to meet with Lily to understand what her preferred thoughts or methods are on that.
Do you have some thoughts, Nicole?
Just would want to make sure that the grant that we're getting from the state allows for this use, you know,
Oh, right, okay.
which I'm sure it does.
That sounds to me like it does.
You're saying it does?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So majority of the towns who've done this have either been able to take the money and give 100% back to the developer to help offset the cost for these types of developments, or they give back about 80% and take some of the rest. Wasn't able to get in contact with any who'd taken a portion, but
Probably just the grant administration one.
That's something to consider, the paperwork aspect of it and employees working on that.
No, I agree, but I think we need to join Lily on that, because it would be coming essentially through her office. I mean, I know that you'd be involved, and Tim, Lefkovich too, but.
it would be, the reimbursement would certainly be a question for Lily in terms of paperwork, but I could add that for the grant administration of it is very similar to that Demo New Hampshire grant. It's a very light lift on my end. It's not anything like quarterly or monthly reporting like some of these other grants we have to keep an eye on.
You gotta get that demo.
Well, we're submitting hopefully this week, so fingers crossed, right?
Anything to add, Jeff?
Yeah, and like I said, we can certainly handle the administration. We're pretty well set up for that. And we can determine what types of feedback, periodic reporting, all of that you would like to see. That way you're ensured that the funds are using, specifically for the project, and exactly what line items the funds are being used for and when they were being used.
So the Invest New Hampshire grant program has to be applied for by the town.
Right.
Yeah.
And what will we do? Apply for it and then just keep it because we approved it at a planning board meeting?
We potentially could, but it's very difficult to do that. We've had other projects so we've had other projects with workforce housing that's been approved, and we've not been able to move forward with applying for the grant because they're not ready to submit building permits. The timeline doesn't match up with the grant criteria. Jeff is interested in meeting the grant criteria in this instance, so we know that he'll do what he needs to on his end to get us those funds designated. Yeah.
I think I get it.
I do.
For a lot of towns, Peterborough, not necessarily, it kind of came out as an incentive for towns to rewrite zoning. We didn't necessarily need to do a whole lot of that, but we certainly have projects that came online that are eligible for this, more than just this one that we've heard of. So if we were to accept this, or just say, allow me to apply for the funds, we're still eligible for many more funds. The original cap was $1 million, and I'm told that that's since been lifted, so potentially we could request more for other projects beyond $1 million, but right now this is the only application that's come forward.
So this application would be focused on Catholic Charities project. We could then apply again for additional funds.
For a different project,
For a
so for
different
instance,
project,
Stone
okay.
Barn has 12 units that are workforce housing, so that'd be another $120,000.
Right. But
Yeah.
that's nowhere near ready.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, what are you needing from us?
Well, for me, it would be permission to apply for the grant. And I think for Jeff, it would be some type of an understanding that those funds would be designated back to him for the purposes of this project.
Have you done this stuff before, Jeff?
Well, Catholic Charities operates about 563 units of housing at different levels. I personally have done this before.
Yeah, no, I know that. I mean, I'm talking about applying for this grant or having the.
Oh, sorry. No, this is our first time as well. But the organization has received grants from a wide range of grant-making institutions.
Okay. Yeah, well, just so long as, Lily has her say about how she wants to see it handled.
Absolutely.
I'm not worried about that.
Right, and the detail is the town accepting the money and holding on to it and then giving it as needed per unit that's.
It allows for some creativity there, so we can hold on to it. We could simply write a check back to them. They kind of allow some discretion for the community to decide with that applicant.
Do we have to decide that? That's what I'm.
Oh, no, you don't have to decide that now. I think I had recommended to Jeff that he should have this conversation with the board because it's not my decision to have. And if there was a percentage that you'd want to keep, that's all up to you guys to decide. So I think for the purposes of this, if there's, for the record, a commitment that the funds can be turned back to him, then we're squared away.
what the commitment is, that they would essentially be building us.
Yeah.
We would hold on to the funds. Catholic Charities would be, as they do their completion, they would request funds with receipts, and
Yep.
we would compensate them as long as Lily is okay with
Yeah,
that.
as long as Lily's okay with
Okay.
whatever that reimbursement method is.
But I'll make the motion that authorizing you to actually complete and do the application.
Okay.
Second.
Any other, you guys want to weigh in?
I don't see any hands.
I just had one quick comment, Rick Lesser. It seems like it would be beneficial to the town if we held on to the funds, because, you know, if it was in our bank for a year or however long it takes to do this project, it'd be nice if the town was earning some interest on this. I don't know if that's a factor or not, but just throw that out.
I don't know if this.
Or if you're even allowed to put it in a.
That could be a
Good
question
point.
I asked, and
Yeah,
I thought
question
that-
for Lily.
I thought that same thing, that's why we should.
Okay, that would be.
Yeah, okay, so,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, good one.
Good to see you.
Appreciate it. We'll keep you posted.
you're welcome to sit for the rest of our budget meeting.
Thank you. Have a good night.
thanks, Jeff, we'll be in touch.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Danica.
thanks. All right, up next.
We've just recently revised the contract for policing that we have with the town of Sharon. Most of it really stays the same. It was a little bit of semantics. We cleaned up the way that the funding was set up in the contract, since we no longer have the grant that initially funded the first policing. I'm trying to remember what kind of grant that was years back.
That was the Department of Justice.
Yep.
So we acquired another officer. Town of Sharon, it was a 3-year grant. Town of Sharon offset the cost of that grant for the first 3 years, with a commitment thereafter to continue the coverage, which they've done since 2005.
But somehow some of that language had stayed in the contract even after that grant had long since expired. So we tidied all that up, and Town of Sharon has already approved it. Their most recent selectmen's meeting, and so we're asking for you to do the same.
I sat in the meeting when we had with the Sharon people, Chet and Rich. And it was a very amicable meeting. I didn't think they had any objections at all. It was just a matter of clarifying language.
We're required by state law for police services to have a written contract in place.
Hold your feet to the fire.
Yes.
Was that your motion?
Motion to accept.
Yeah, I'd second that motion. All those in favor?
All right.
Great, thank you. And then we have minutes from January 17th. You guys read them?
I already notified Ally. Hi, Ally. She's out there somewhere in there. I made a motion and seconded it in one of the cases, so I don't think I seconded the motion.
Oh,
So she needs to clarify. who
This is
actually
a simple edit.
did this.
We have to review the film on that
That
one.
one, that's true.
go to the videotape. All right,
No
I'll
shenanigans.
second that. All those in favor?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right, 5 minutes early.
Take a 6-minute break until we reconvene. So, Budget Committee can join us at the table, and we'll open back up in a few minutes.
Who's going to go first? Scott? Sure.
Can throw into the budget committee meeting now. Could be if you want to, you could support chief and Seth's budgets.
That was all.
One of the large building.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we have a Catholic charity.
I think they were in there with so.
I think it's 6 minutes.
That's Catholic Chairs?
I don't know what's so
Well,
hard.
it's
but-
Yeah.
Originally developed by Catholic charities, I mean renovated.
Oh, could have been, I don't remember.
I'm pretty sure it was renovated by Catholic charities. It's down right at the bottom of, right there at the intersection.
Break it?
Near the-
Stone retaining wall.
Yeah.
Break it. Someone needs to open a convenience store over in Brookstone.
Did you,
You won't get any complaints from your
read this
neighbors,
article in the Electric Ledger transcript about the fire station?
Pretty good.
Is it fairly accurate in what they said?
It's pretty damn close, yeah. Yeah, good. They had investors, and they bought
Very good.
So now it's
Mine hasn't moved around in my driveway for a week or so.
That used to be March.
Harvey
Remember the days?
presentation last week. The project manager, he had an itemization of the different
They
drivers.
must turn all their fans on before.
Can I get a copy of that? Sure.
Well, you know,
Yeah. I don't have it on me right now.
you know
No, I
that
forget.
physicist,
Yeah, thank you.
I think I should really grab your email address right now, so it's one of the districts.
Neil deGrasse.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, he was making
If I
that
neglect to do so,
the days actually get longer during the winter.
email if you don't
Because
listen.
the winter
Just so I
solstice
get
is on
a lot of
first day
things.
winter. And after that,
No, I'll give you one, that way you have my email address, that way I don't.
I got yours.
days in winter, they're actually getting longer.
I'm Dick Reynolds.
Happy to do it.
And I have noticed that this.
I'll try to make it easier. In fact,
Okay.
The better way
I'll
is.
shoot your email.
that helps.
He asked me.
So far.
Yeah, you can go. Not yet. It's on.
Eldon Munson. Eldon and Errol Dumeister. We don't have to. I am. I was thinking about staying, but.
I can leave.
Well, do you want me to, I'll stay for some stuff. You want me to-
Yeah, I have the number.
Requisition process.
Something.
Figured out.
I'm so sorry. I'm interested. Yeah, where'd you go? No, it's bounced around in terms of what it should be, but it's really, it falls back. Okay, really? So that's familiar for.
How do they look at projects?
Okay, that's good to know. Right. Yeah. Too bad.
So have you ever, the dumplings from the place there, was on Rich Diners Drive-In Steakhouse?
No.
I don't know, supposedly the best dumplings on earth, Asian
We'll get
dumplings.
there.
She might be.
I've had,
We're on there.
Probably, yep.
Which would be a comfort.
Oh, I think they're just waiting for the clock right now. Yep.
I don't know what that means.
Gotta wait right till
Less than a
5:30.
month.
Are you?
It's like a fancy bird.
Phone?
It's one of the brands.
Okay.
And I had chocolate kale salad.
All right, welcome back, everyone. It's time for you to be at the meeting. It's 5:30. I'm going to hand it over to Rick Lesser, Chair of the Budget Committee, to introduce the Budget Committee, and we'll get going.
Thanks, Tyler. We've got Don Parkhurst out in the audience, and Leslie Lewis is out there as well. And then Dick Reynolds to my far right, Mary Clark, Carl Mazzino, and Mandy Sliber. Andrew and Al will not be joining us tonight, but we do have a quorum, so I think we can just go right ahead. And we wanted to start out with the chief. Ready to go?
I am, sir. Okay. What I'll do is I'll run down through the highlights instead of the $50 here, $50 there. Start with the administration block. That, as you can see by your spreadsheets, it's up 11.93%. What's in that number? Salaries is the biggest, 108,792 is the increase from what was originally budgeted last year to FY '25. There were salary adjustments after that original budgeted figure. That's part of why that's up. And there's also funds in there for a beginning phase of a succession plan for 2 upcoming retirements within the next 2 to 3 years. That's going to take some time. Finding help right now is extremely difficult. I'm currently down 2 full-time vacancies, and I've got an officer that's been out for 1 year now due to an injury he sustained while effecting an arrest. We've gotten to the point where I've had to take my detective out of plain clothes, and he's been in uniform for 4 weeks. He'll be at least another 6 to 8 weeks, using myself and the prosecutor to cover shifts as well. So finding help is very, very difficult, and it's not just Peterborough, it's everywhere. But we're doing what we can there. As salaries increase, so does overtime. That's up 67,000. With salary and overtime costs going up, so does the state retirement funding. That's up 32,537. The next largest figure is computer software. The software system we're using now was put in place in the year 2000, so it's 24 years old. The company that makes the software, services it, will no longer be servicing that software or upgrading it for the law enforcement side. They're leaning more toward the private sector now. That's also a company that the town has done business with for the financial software in the past. What we're doing is, we've done some research on this. Most of New Hampshire is transitioning into a company called CSI. They're based out of New Jersey. They're law enforcement specialists for software. State Police, Manchester, Merrimack, Bedford, and many other towns have just transitioned into that same software. It has a lot of great features, such as the state forms that we use are upgraded automatically. So nothing has to be done manually. That's all done for us. Traffic accident reports. Instead of doing field sketches with templates, we could download from a GIS system and plant the picture right onto the report and simply drop the vehicles into place. So it's an amazing piece of software. That we would be leasing from year to year with the option to buy out at any given year. So we wouldn't be stuck with a large piece of software. If we were to purchase it, we'd be looking at anywhere between $200,000 and $400,000. So with this $45,000 increase, that also includes transferring all of our existing 24 years worth of data into the new software. It's built into that figure as well. Yes?
So the 60K, is that this year?
That would be for the first year.
First year, and then...
After that, it's 37 something,
Okay.
38 every year thereafter. 20,000 of that is the work that's involved to move all of the
Right.
data into the new software system.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And I've been working with the IT department closely on that.
Right.
It's cloud-based, so it's much safer than what we currently have. A lot of unique features to that. Those are the highlights on the administrative block. Other things are up, such as equipment, furnishings, and tools by $3,800, small amounts there.
Chief, can we talk about the salaries and overtime numbers that increase? You mentioned 2 retirees. Could you be a little more specific about that right now? As far as which individuals are contemplating retiring?
Sure.
Any of them sitting in this room?
You put me on the spot, aren't you?
We already said so with the last year's budget. Yeah, so.
Myself and the captain. Captain Belte.
And we allocated quite a bit of money last year planning for that potentially. Did we not spend that money?
Half of that was removed. It was a salary for one individual.
Right. So this
This
one.
year, we're including full salary.
Okay.
But we're looking at a couple of different options right now. We're just in the beginning phases of that.
But the 1.382 from last year that we appropriated, not all that is going to be used, is that my understanding?
That is correct. I will be correct on that.
We have 3 open positions that are budgeted.
That we probably will not be able to fill at least.
We are trying to fill
Yeah.
them.
Right. And the long-term disability, gentlemen?
It'll be
contemplated
1
now?
year, February 13th.
And what's his current status as far as returning?
We can't talk about that.
Okay.
It's personnel and medical.
Any other questions before we move on?
You mentioned that the overtime payments are going up. I'm not too sure I see that in your, the appropriation for last year went up and then it's going down for next year. Is it?
No,
No?
no, definitely up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the line below.
Second line down.
All right, so is that up because the rates are higher, which seemed to be what you said, or is it because the number of hours is higher, or is it both?
Both.
I think they would be with the shortage.
It is. There's only so much that myself, the prosecutor, and the detective can do. Trying to fill 120 hours a week with 3 vacancies.
Right. And to back up the smaller number that we use for this year's budget, we were on deck to have a full staff with the exception of the captain position that we had budgeted for. And only one of those positions ended up working out. And we had somebody else leave and move across the country as soon as we hired the next person. So it's just, so we thought that there would be a need for less overtime because we were feeling very hopeful in January when positions were filled. But then that wasn't the case by the time we reached June.
Finding help and retaining help are both very challenging. We're doing our best to keep 2 officers on duty at all times, and quite often that's not enough, especially during the day.
Didn't we raise the salary last year for the?
We did, so that we're competitive now at agencies our size throughout the state. That was done through 2 surveys, one which was done by Lily and Nicole, and then a statewide survey that was done by the Greenland, New Hampshire Police Department, which I've shared with both Lily and Nicole.
Competitive, but we're not winning the competition? Is it?
No, we're at the norm. Okay, we're not the lowest, but not the highest.
Now, as far as the overtime, do we have any opportunities to just give compensatory time at all? And this is maybe not just specific to the police department, but also generally in town or PTO. Do we do that at all, or strictly overtime? And there's no other, is that funny, Lily?
I apologize for laughing. He doesn't let anybody take time off. So.
Not entirely true.
I apologize.
They have babies to get tired.
Yes, I've got one out on maternity leave, then I've got another one going out on maternity, so we have that as well. We do have to deny vacation requests and time off from time to time in order to keep 2 people on duty.
So it's just the opposite, essentially.
Yeah. And that's why I have no problem using myself, the prosecutor, and the detective. Help out, but there's only so much we can do there.
Mary?
Yes.
Chief, I'd like to return to the computer services line item and follow up on Dick's question. In terms of training the staff on this new computer system, is that included in the $60,000?
That's inclusive in that price. It is.
Because I noticed, I didn't mean to jump ahead, but the staff development under training is flat, so it is included in that $60,000.
It is included in that figure for the computer services. Staff development pays for training outside of what the police academy puts on. And the training mandates are increasing constantly from year to year. We're now required to do a great deal of bias type training. Mental health training was added this year. We have to do a minimum of 8 hours of that as well. But most of that is put on by the New Hampshire Police Academy. And that is funded through penalty assessment. A certain portion of every traffic ticket goes to the Police Academy, and that's what pays for our training.
Bill, did you have a question?
I have actually a couple questions, Chief. Under police training, you have a significant increase in overtime. What does that entail?
We're trying to separate the overtime from a regular overtime account, accounting for it, essentially. when an officer is on a day off and I have to send him to the police academy.
Ah,
Okay,
okay, we pay him overtime for that.
exactly. If he or she are on a day off.
I also noticed,
No, that's different.
sorry, I also noticed that the budget for gasoline has gone up considerably.
Mhm.
Are we doing more patrols, or?
No, it's the cost of gasoline, and that varies depending upon our workload from year to year.
Do we have a set rate that we use?
So, I did all of the fuel calculations for the entire budget, and I'm using 6 years and 3 months of data of gallons used by each department, and the multiplier is current pricing for those commodities.
Right, and that's uniform across all the departments?
Yes, so that figure was developed by myself using 6 years and 3 months of gallons used by the police department
Okay.
specifically.
And
Yeah, I noticed.
as far as current pricing, what, was that set back in January or December? When did you come up with the current pricing number?
I readjusted everything in December before I sent out the packets to everybody at the end of December.
Do you know what that is roughly, the gas price, do you recall?
I cannot remember the gas prices. I remember the diesel is
steady.
$4.52. Because we.
Yeah, I know it's less than what you or I would pay at the pump down the street.
Yeah. Well, I noticed that the actual for 2022, 23 is roughly the same as what this year. And that was an actual, so last year was underestimated, I guess. Thank you.
Actually, if you want to move on to, I don't think we've really addressed police training.
Yeah, training,
Go ahead. I know Bill asked a question about it.
the overtime, and again, we're trying to separate the training overtime from the shift overtime or court overtime for accounting purposes. Retirement, again, that applies anytime there's a salary or retirement or overtime involved. Training supplies and payroll taxes. And this comes as a result of being forced to, being mandated by the state to do more training. A lot of our training is done when the officers are off duty. Very difficult for them to sit through a class, whether it be in Peterborough or in Concord, and answer calls at the same time. Gasoline, we've already touched on that. Vehicle parts and supplies and repair, like anything else, that goes up every year as well. Parts and supplies, that includes tires, things of that nature, is up by $5,000. We're actually able to reduce the last block, special police details. We reduced that one by $20,000. That pays for the off-duty officers that come in and work with Eversource and the tree trimming crews and that sort of thing. Because we've been so short-staffed, we have not been able to fulfill those requests. And I don't see that changing soon. We've been allowing the utility companies to use flaggers, which you'll see out there from time to time. So therefore, we've been able to reduce that budget.
Well, that expense would be recompensed, right? Yeah.
It would,
Yeah.
it would, if it were there. But if we're not going to use that, I chose to remove that from the budget, at least for now.
Have there been any issues with the private flagmen as opposed to police, or has it worked out okay so far?
For the most part, it's worked out. We get a lot of complaints about the backups at the traffic lights in the bridge project. Whether it's directly attributed to the flaggers or not, I really couldn't say. I think that-
As far as safety, hasn't been a concern.
Or safety, no. It's volume and people having to wait 5 or 10 minutes.
It's terrible around here, I gotta tell you.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Exactly. So, but
Having
they've
grown
got,
up in Detroit and Chicago,
Yeah, it's impossible to budget your time for a 3-minute increase in your commute.
yeah.
that's
But they're doing what they can. They've got the flashing billboards out there telling people to expect delays.
Yeah.
When you close down Route 101 for one lane, there's gonna be backups.
Exactly.
There's no amount of flaggers that's gonna fix that.
So, those are the highlights. Any other questions?
I just,
Dave, go ahead.
is Ernie Deltate a full-time?
No, he's part-time. He was full-time, retired, stayed on part-time. He's still my second in command and does a lot of administrative duties.
Yeah.
Tyler?
Yes, Tyler?
So if and when you retire, we can expect you to come back part-time?
I hope to, actually.
As a
Truly do.
flagger.
We'll take them.
No, truly, I hope to, just to stay in it and help out.
Well, we'll see if it's in the budget.
Very well.
I don't know if we can afford it.
Well, it wouldn't be as chief, it'd be, I know.
And
Yes, ma'am.
I have more of a comment, I think, than a question, just because I know it got brought up, the salaries and the open positions is obviously something that's very challenging for all departments, but I know for police in particular around the state. But I know that what we offer for pay and the supportive work environment are only two factors. I think we do very well at those here in this town, and I thank you for that. But unfortunately, the biggest factor in finding people is a place for them to live, and that is something you can't control. So, I mean, I just want to make it, I just wanted to put that comment that I thank you for everything you're doing to try to fill those positions, but there are a lot of factors that, unfortunately, it's a specialized position, and if people want to move here to take it and they have no place to move to, your hands are kind of tied. So,
They are.
Don't lose hope.
But we're fortunate. I've got I've got one that lives in Deering, they live in Antrim, Jaffrey, Ipswich, so you're nearby.
Other questions for the chief?
I wanted to point out that you do also have revenues for the police department, that some of them are significant. The town of Sharon pays for police services, and that cost is going up based off of budgeting and the value of their community versus the value of Peterborough and population-wise, number of calls, that sort of thing.
School also funds
So
one position.
exactly, so the Kania pays for the school resource officer, that's the last line there. That was a new addition last year, right?
2 years
Yeah.
ago.
2 years ago
This
now.
is our second year,
This is our
yep.
second year with the school resource
Mhm.
officer. Which, the feedback that I've been getting from school board members, teachers, faculty, and parents has been very positive.
I've gotten the same.
Have you, okay.
Right. And you can also see that
Super
special
good.
detail revenue that you're talking about. It's the full cost of the salaries plus the retirement cost.
Well, thank you for bringing out my favorite category.
Now, I'm sorry, why did the special detail revenue drop down for this year?
Because the special detail expenditures is cut in half. It
Well,
was
that
from
was
40,000
flag
to
and-
20,000, so it's,
Thank you.
that amount of money is the exact amount that is budgeted to be expended.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And this revenues from Sharon, that's the updated number after negotiation, okay,
Well, we didn't
We didn't change
renegotiate
the
it.
funding formula.
okay,
We
right,
just clarified it.
right, that's right.
Any other questions about the income? General questions about policing? Thank you very much, Chief.
You're welcome. Thank you, folks.
I don't want to hear any more talk about retirement.
Neither do we. My turn? Say our turn. Excuse me. Okay, well, tough act to follow, it's Chief Bernard, right? We all know each other, but for those who don't, I'm Seth McLean. I kind of have most of the team here tonight. Our business manager's not with us tonight, but just quickly, if you have questions and things, the superintendents, the recycling manager, our code enforcement officer are all here. As you remember maybe from last year, code enforcement got sort of moved into the public works administration realm, so Tim's here if there's any questions there. But Nate Brown is our utility superintendent. Darren is our recycling manager. Tim Rose, Tim, and other Tim currently here is our code enforcement. Tim, is our general services manager, formerly highway, building and grounds, park, cemetery. He's got a big portfolio, but we'll talk about that in a second. So again, I'm Seth. Thank you for the opportunity. I always look forward to doing the budget discussion. I said to Lily an hour and a half ago because it gives us an opportunity to talk about some of the things you don't see that we're working on. So we don't get a lot of opportunities to do that. I like to bring those up and highlight the good work that the department is doing for the town. So let's talk about the FY25 budget. And I hope you don't mind, I know a lot of people this year have used the spreadsheets. Their budgets are a lot smaller than ours. I feel like for efficiency's sake, it makes sense to continue to synthesize this into a smaller document, but we do have the spreadsheet. We can go through any of that if you have questions, but I've tried to do similar to Chief, is call out those items that are not level funded, that have a swing one direction or the other, and that there's a notable change too. So go over a couple quick things just to kind of lay the land, particularly for people who are not as plugged in, who might be watching and curious about what a public works department does outside of paving roads and patching potholes. We'll go over our staff, because I think it's important quickly just to lay that out there, because so much of what public works does is the people that work for the community and labor and do all the work in the field, and I think that's the bulk of a lot of the expenses are either for folks that work here or the services, parts, pieces, and things that support the work that they're doing. Obviously, we're going to go over the operating budget, we'll go over revenue, talk about some CIP that's gone through the process this year, just so there's no question about what's going to be coming up on the docket through the process as we reach town meeting and the ballot. Try, as always, to answer any questions, but if we can't, there's another meeting, we'll be back with answers, or we'll do our best to make sure we're responsive and get you an answer if we don't have it tonight. I want to say a couple thank yous, mostly first to Lily. Lily, you're going to see our project list. A lot of you know how busy the department is with the things that we're currently building or that we're planning. And I got to give you credit, because she jumped in and basically wrote most of our budget before we even asked for the help. So, which was hugely, hugely helpful, because a lot of you know we're working on a fire station project, but we're also working on some other construction projects, and these guys are busier than we've ever been out in the field. So it was a huge help. Huge thank you to the guys here as well as Gretchen, for all the work they did researching and getting ready for presenting a responsible budget tonight. They put a lot of work into it, and that work starts years ago, planning through the capital process and thinking about what we need to do, and we really try to put as tight a budget together as we can, and everybody here deserves a lot of credit. And then, of course, people that are volunteering their time, of course, thank you for being part of the budget committee. And this process is a very rewarding process for this town, and it works really well because of all of us working together, so thank you. So what do? Highest level, we work on enhancing the safety and livability of the community. We provide and manage services and infrastructure, supporting reliable and safe transportation, water, and a clean, safe, and enjoyable environment. So the top level, that's where we focus. All of our efforts go towards this mission. And to do so, we deliver 170 million gallons of clean water through Nate and his team. We treat over 140 million gallons of dirty water, at the wastewater treatment plant, Nate's team. With support from other public work members, it's a collaborative effort, but they're focused there all the time. Tim's team maintains 70 miles of public roadways. Darren's team, with some support here with the office, we're doing things a little bit different than we used to. Process over 2,000 tons of waste a year, 70% recycled rate. Tim's team again, Tim Rose, maintain all town buildings, repair town buildings. Maybe not all the time, but we're involved in most of the town buildings, and we support when necessary and needed, because his team's got a lot of that practical knowledge and ability to work in the field on buildings, facilities, and grounds. In addition, as if it wasn't enough, he's got 37 acres of public parks and rail trail to keep an eye on, and that involves also working with volunteer groups there and trying to coordinate those efforts. That's mostly Tim coordinating all those efforts as well. This guy is incredibly busy, if you don't know. We support many special requests for service from the community. Projects pop up as emails fly these days, and we go down chase down those requests and do our best to be responsive to the community. And we support other town departments as needed and requested. So I like to highlight, like I said, some of the work that's going on presently and some of the things that the budget for FY25 would support, just to give you a sort of a scope of all the things we sort of have going now or are going to get underway on. Cold Springs project is halfway through construction. Board members have visited. We're there every other week. And that project's progressing very nicely. I got to give Lily a lot of credit on that. We work on a lot of the financial mechanisms, and she does the work to make sure that we get, as was alluded to earlier before we began, our reimbursement through the pay requisition process. So do have a lot of experience managing processes similar to the Catholic Charities model that was sort of proposed with us as the financier, but we'll talk about that. She's like, what's going on? Tim's taken on the DPW refurbishing project. He had a kickoff meeting last week with architects and others to start really get that ball rolling on that. That got delayed, as many of you know, because of the pandemic, price increases, and us trying to sort of figure out what we're doing with our project out on Elm Street, because we have 3 simultaneous projects sort of occurring. I won't read all these ad nauseum, but just a couple of highlights. The PCC refurbishing project, that we're doing a small groundbreaking this month actually to get that going, which keeps us eligible for our grant, and we'll get into a little bit heavier planning on that. Big project coming up for Nate's, but a lot of us are sort of working on this one, including our GIS department, is our lead inventory mandate from the EPA. We are going to be, over the course of the next year, having to catalog every piece of the water distribution system to determine any known sources of lead. That includes digging down and visually inspecting every piece of it. So you're likely to get a letter from us if your home was built after 86. It's going to be a big project, and we're going to be putting out a lot more. Before 86. So we're going to be putting out a lot more information on that, but that's coming down from federal agencies, and something that's going to take a lot of time planning. The net result is going to be an inventory that's a searchable database that people can identify. And where the program goes from there, we shall see. Yes, sir.
Does that include the run from the street to the residence or the business or the building?
Yeah. We have to see both sides of the shut-off.
So it'll be quite the heavy lift, and we've got till October to finish all of it. So we're on our way. The board might remember we applied for a grant to help us with that. We were successful in getting $50,000 to help with those efforts, but you will see a lot of activity on that over the coming months.
Will that require any extra employees?
We
try to do it in-house?
We have the money, and we have some discretionary use of that if we need that, but what's emerging, I think, is a plan that we're likely to be able to manage in-house. You want to add anything to that, Nate?
No, I think you covered it. We have to dig down to pretty much every one that was built before 86, but we're going to use a vac truck, so we'll just make a small hole, hopefully, and then just get eyes on the pipe on both sides of the shutoff.
So a lot going on. Fire station project's been on a lot of people's minds here. We talked about it last week. That's a department initiative as well. Grove and Elm Street Bridge, we'll talk a little bit about those through the budget tonight. That's gone through the CIP process over the last few years, but that's about to get very real in terms of the planning and execution of that, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things happening. Make sure I don't miss anything that I know anyone's really interested to hear about. Well, here's one. Utilities rate study is ongoing right now, working with finance department, the team on this end. Board's been brought up to speed on that, but we're working on that presently, which will evolve into more robust conversations with the community as the next year unfolds. But in any case, we're very busy. That's obviously in addition to all of our operational things I mentioned on the previous slide. So we've got a lot of projects happening, but we also need to maintain our responsibilities operationally to the community.
Seth, could you just put a little more color on that rate
Sure.
study? What's involved there?
So we're currently analyzing the water and sewer enterprise fees it's been many years since it's been done. So currently the fees are not adequate to even fund the operating portion of the budgets. We've been using the enterprise funds, at least on the sewer end, to offset where rates aren't competitive as prices have increased, particularly over the last 3 years. And when the Cold Springs project was approved through town meeting, we made obviously a commitment at that time, given the amount of debt that's coming online, to evaluate the fees. But there's two parts to that. We're not just evaluating the fees and saying, here's what the new rate looks like to fund our operation and our debt. We've also received a lot of feedback from the community over the last 5-7 years that people want us to evaluate an alternative rate structure that would be a tiered consumption-driven model. So doing away with sort of the conventional minimum charge and going towards a possibly a program that incentivizes people who use less water through lower rates. But there's a lot of decision-making that has to happen from the select board and the community over the coming months on that. I'm just saying that's one of the things that we've been asked to evaluate, so we're currently working with a firm on that.
Any other questions before we go?
All right. If you recall from last year, so I'll just jump into the budget. I try to take this sequentially. As you go through, we, through Lily's efforts and the team, collapsed many budgets into a couple. The Public Works Administration budget had been spread out all over the budgets, and last year it was collapsed into its own budget. And then when we get into the general services budget, if you recall, that was many different budgets that were collapsed into the general services budget as well. And I won't repeat myself all night long, but you've already been, Lily's already presented on personnel-related costs, the 2% cost of living and 2% merit, so I won't dwell too much on salaries, other than a couple outliers where there were some salary adjustments made over the last year that are reflected in the current budget. So the Public Works Administration includes the personnel costs for my position, the code enforcement officer and our business manager, who's Gretchen, who handles the phones many you've talked to and work with. includes the 2% cost of living, 2% merit, but otherwise generally level funded from where we were last year. And I can just keep cruising unless I see a hand, if that works for you. So some of the things, and I won't read all these off, I put this up every year, but some of what the Public Works Administration portion of the budget handles is everything you're seeing up on the screen, and then other projects as needed at the bottom. So we're handling the leadership elements of our department: budget and expense management, capital planning, project and construction management, which we already sort of touched on, supporting town administration, human resources, grant writing, so on and so forth. So a lot of all the administrative work is collapsed sort of into that budget, whereas prior it had been spread out through all the different budgets and a little bit hard to figure out what your actual costs were for our services. So let's talk about general services. Formerly highway, parks, cemetery, buildings and grounds, but now general services, so we've collapsed it in. And what do they do? Talked about it a little bit. Obviously paving, repairing, plowing town roads, parking lots, winter operations, stormwater and drainage systems, roadside mowing, brushing and tree work, all sidewalk work, either planning or execution, because our team has taken on a lot of that work over the last few years, repairing, replacing signs, guardrails, fleet services, supporting other town departments and activities, managing town streetlights, and obviously customer service. Very responsible group led by Tim. Again, collapsed into that budget from previous years, although reflected now as a comparison against last year, is also facilities, parks and cemeteries, which amounts to 37 acres of town-owned land, parks and cemetery lawns that Tim manages through a number of employees, which I list here. So it's 11 full-time employees in general services and 3 part-time employees that are budgeted for seasonal work. I'll go through the highlights, and again, I won't keep repeating the same numbers that you're seeing throughout the entire budget. The top line is just, again, the reminder I've already given about how we collapsed budgets in. So now this is all of the services that I just mentioned, and I'll call out the areas that are outliers within that budget. We can certainly talk about other line items as we go, but I've put the outliers on here. So first is call-in time is up $5,700. It's a reflection of the personnel-related adjustments, but also the true reality of the call-in time over the last year. When we're looking at last year, our winters have become more precipitous, our call-ins are becoming more frequently, and our budget reflects that. Yes, Aaron?
Last year, you talked about cross-training among your staff, which is a terrific idea. How has that affected the, say, the proportion of contracting that you have to do versus what you're doing in-house with existing staff?
That's a great question. I mean, could you be very detailed or give a couple concrete examples?
Well, just kind of.
Sure. So one example comes to mind right away, cross-training between our general services department and utilities, if you recall, and I'm going to talk about it, but given this error that I note here, we had taken out services from our budget last year and said we were going to be buying a new Vector truck and that we would be training there, and the highway department or general services we'd be working with the utilities department using that piece of heavy equipment to take what was a contractor out of the equation and save us money. So we're looking for efficiencies like that. Any other example? Does that answer?
Well, do you generally see a downward trend in the amount that you're contracting externally?
We have. I think that's part of why the budgets, although a little hard to compare year over year, have tended to stay relatively stable, particularly in the services area, because as we have been able to find opportunities to bring in those costs, I just gave that one example, we have done so, and I think that's reflected if you look at our services historically. Sure.
Except just generally, are you fully staffed right now, or do you have any glaring holes in the?
We're fully staffed right now.
Great.
For the present level of service, I feel comfortable with where we're at. We don't have our seasonal employees right now, so that might change in May if we can't get the help we need. But we'll figure that out when the time comes, because whether it's policing, fire and ambulance, or even seasonal labor, it's still been very, very challenging to find, particularly on temporary sort of deals. So,
but as far as your full-time staff, you're in a good place?
Full-time, we're in a good place right now. You know, we will continue to evaluate it as we go forward. I think you can always use more, but I think we're in a good place. We're doing a good job keeping up with the work we have. One wild card is going to be as we bring online the Cold Springs project. That's outside of town, we currently think we can probably manage it as is, but it depends on how much work ultimately it entails when we get that far. But at this point, I feel good about our staffing levels.
And I guess I'll ask my overtime question that I asked the chief about. Are you able to do any kind of comp time or PTO, or as far as overtime, as far as controlling that? Just generally, what's the policy of the department?
Given our overtime is usually for emergency needs, travel, roadway, or water main breaks, which I hate to say out loud, we gotta have a running joke every time I say it, or one of us says it. We're vulnerable. But I need to answer the
There's
question.
one breaking right now.
Thanks. The nature of our work usually means we don't have a lot of leeway, and we don't, my personal philosophy is that we don't disincentivize the employees to respond during off hours, bad weather.
Right, but if it was the employee's benefit, in other words, Friday afternoon, you worked 5 hours overtime last week, I'd love to take off, it looks like we're covered for the week, that kind of thing. We really don't utilize that.
We haven't needed to so much. We've been able to, if you looked at the overtime, you notice we kind of blew through the overtime budget given particularly the late winter push last year for general services.
That's understandable.
And felt at the time, looking at the budget, that the budget could continue to support it by overspending that line. So my philosophy remains that I don't want to disincentivize employees who want to come and get this work done.
No question.
Because you're pushed into overtime doesn't mean the rest of the work
Yeah, it's
doesn't
more on a
still need
voluntary
done.
basis.
But at the end of the day, if it really came down to, looking at the macro level of the budget, then we would have to make decisions about how we staff our time to finish out the year so we're not in a difficult situation financially.
Thank you.
As noted on the screen, there was an error in the budget on the services line. Last year, you recall, and I sort of touched on it when I answered Mary's question, we had reduced the services line by $10,000. I should have put a negative there, but in any case, on the last iteration of the budget that goes out from Lily will reflect that services line under operations and general services being $10,000 less.
So it'd be 80,800?
Yes.
The same numbers last year?
Yep. Right.
Thank you.
That was a savings that we realized through the purchase of the Vector truck and working interdepartmental on that program. Electricity may have already been talked about through other budgets, but that's budgeted based on current rate and how much it's actually been costing us. Lily does all of our energy forecasting at this point, and the forecast presently shows that it's an increase to general services based on what we know those inputs to be into the budget. Repair and maintenance line is showing up 10,000, but that's actually an extrapolation. There used to be a redundant budget line, so redundant, but and under the winter operations portion of the budget, there was a $10,000 supply line. We collapsed that. That was put into the existing supply line, just looked like a redundancy and made it easier for Tim when he's coding bills to separate those out. So not actually an increase, it's a movement within the budget. Diesel, we talked a little bit about fuel. Lily gave a justification on how the diesel forecasts have been arrived at, and diesel is up tremendously in the general services budget, and there's a couple things driving that. Obviously the prices are up. We're also doing more work in-house, to your question. We're using more fuel than we had before. We're hauling our own sand, we're oftentimes hauling our own snow, and we're avoiding contracting out through other hauling services for particularly snow removal and other services. So it's a true reflection of where the rates are now and the consumption that we used in the prior year. And it is expensive, but it's primarily driven by those diesel rates just don't seem to want to budge from where they've been since the pandemic at this point. But also a reflection of bringing that work in-house and not spending them as much on contracts. So. Salt and sand is up 8,000. That's based on present rates. Tim does the salt and sand. We work together on the bidding, but we work fairly closely on wrapping up those contracts every year. It's a competitive bid process, and we get our lowest possible pricing. It's obviously driven by pricing, but how severe your winter is and how much that we end up having to put down. I would say, Tim, the last couple of years have been a lot of sand, a lot of ice events, water.
A lot of sand. Salt has increased tremendously last year. This year, we thought it was going to go up, but it actually went down 5 cents. But sand went up, so I mean, it really was a wash anyways. But yeah, with these winters being the rain turned into ice, you use sand like crazy. It just doesn't help the budget at all.
Has that been the situation so far this year?
So far, I mean, really, we only had, maybe one major snowstorm that was over 6 inches. The rest of them have all been I mean, even just last week, we were out running around in the middle of the night sanding roads because it just all turned to ice. You get that freezing fog and all hell breaks loose.
All right. In years past, you've seen sidewalks and stormwater separation collapsed into one line item. To try and present an efficient, as close to balanced budget as we can, we removed 20,000 from that line. We haven't really had to draw on that physically in the field. We've been budgeting for many years on stormwater separation, meaning if we were engaged in any level of digging and we were to encounter sewer crossing into drainage, i.e. sewer ended up in a river, we have an obligation to fix that. Haven't encountered as many of those over the last few years. Many of those were kind of tied up and cleaned up years ago. We'd left the money in the budget for many years, but really haven't drawn upon it. So I felt it was an appropriate time to, given other increases, remove that from the budget at this time. And if we encounter, we will absorb that within our operating budget. So trying to make an offset there, but I'm comfortable with it. Like I said, just have not encountered as many of those. And I hope I'm not regretting that decision, but so far so good. And then post-closure ground monitoring, I know Lily's talked the last couple of years about where this has been trending, if you wanted to take that, Lily.
The last of the monies were withdrawn and provided to us this past week for ground monitoring payments. There's no money left in that capital reserve account. So the document that I sent out to you all in December reflected the thought that there was another $35,000 in there. There is not. So that budget on your document says $35,000. It's now increased to $70,000. The half of the money spent on one of the vendors for that monitoring is charged to the Hampshire Ball Bearings Company. And we have a contract with them to be reimbursed up to $600,000. At this stage, we've been reimbursed $475,000. So I anticipate that we have about 4 more years of revenues coming from New Hampshire Ball Bearings to offset some of that $70,000. But that will also, that revenue line in 4 years will no longer exist as well. So it will just continue to be a monitoring cost to the taxpayers.
So this year, this number could be 70,000?
Yes.
35? But
Yes.
I'm sorry, I got confused there. You said there's still 125,000 that they're going to be paying us eventually.
The contract only calls, first of all, you have to budget for all expenditures in total.
Right.
Expenditures are expenditures, revenues are revenues.
Okay.
So the revenue line for New Hampshire Ball Bearings payment back is on the page 4. Under Department of Public Works, 4th line, $31,000 is expected to be coming from New Hampshire Ball Bearings. That is just an estimate of what we will be receiving in bills from Geo Insight as the vendor that was selected by New Hampshire Ball Bearings about 20 years ago. So we use another company, Absolute Resource, for some of the other work. We cannot bill Ball Bearings for half of Absolute Resources work, only half of Geo Insight's work. $31,000 is expected from there. But the total cost that we've been paying all along is about $70,000. It's just that we had a capital reserve fund with money set aside from the lawsuit that was created, that revenue source that was plugged in there so that we had money for years and years of monitoring payments. It's now dried up.
Oh, okay, thank you. Have we approached New Hampshire Ball Bearings at all, like through the town to say, going forward, take some responsibility? Is there any discussion at all, or? I know it's still a little early,
The
but.
contract came through a lawsuit against New Hampshire Ball Bearings.
Right.
So the responsibility was established, and that was the judgment. That was the order that came out of it. So I don't think there's really any going back and revisiting that at this stage.
And they were here in front of the board not too long ago, within the last year.
Their own on-site cleanup efforts, yeah.
With their cleanup efforts. And they seem to have failed a couple times in their efforts, and they're starting and trying a new process.
They're trying to remediate.
The testing's gotten more extensive too. I have a question. I hate to belabor small items, but last year's budget season, we had like huge increases in electric and fuel costs. Or last year, we were budgeting like well over $5 for diesel fuel, is it? And so diesel and electric costs on a lot of levels has dropped pretty substantially,
Those diesel.
but
and
those are
electric-
still up.
The diesel and electric increases were 2 budgets ago, not last year's budget. Those budgets were dropped by Seth last year, and they are insufficient for the costs that we're experiencing right now. We are not budgeting for $5 per gallon for diesel, we're budgeting $4.05 per gallon, which is what
So
we're.
you're saying last year, I'm like, in
It
a
was
time
two-
warp,
it was
it was
two-
2 years ago, really?
Yeah, it was right before the war in Ukraine broke out.
Okay, question withdrawn.
We had previously used federal forecasting, which didn't hold up, so in my defense, did my best to put good numbers forward following the town's process that had been utilized prior, but that's, obviously, there was a chink in the armor there, and we went a different route.
Yeah, and I need to give credit to Tim. He was the one that has held very organized years and years of slips from all of the commodities companies and was able to provide them to the finance department. And Tanya Rose put together 6+ years of bills paid. So not only the cost, but what was more important to me was the gallons purchased, or the kilowatts purchased, or the tonnage purchased, depending on what the commodity was. And so the forecasting that we're doing now is a 6+ year average of actual usage times current pricing as opposed to federal pricing. So the I use that. I've used that for over 15 years in my experience, and it has always served me well. To have that many years of averages. Right now, the gallons used by the highway department, the average is 21,000 gallons of diesel.
I withdrew the question.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Is it appropriate now to bring this up under general services? Are you going to move on to other departments, or? Well, I've got a couple questions. First of all, community center. We have expenses that are associated with DPW. Shouldn't that be under the rec department?
Those are overseen by Tim Rose and Seth in terms of, it's just an electricity.
It's
and a
electricity
fuel
and
bill.
heating, yeah.
It's our share to cover the food pantries portion of the community center. So we donate the space and the electricity for the food pantry, and so we cover the cost of that, that part of the community center.
Yeah, bills will come in and I'll split them up.
General services TIF projects, the TIF projects?
Yep, I've got a separate section in the PowerPoint to go over the TIF stuff for FY25.
Okay, but none of that's in the budget here.
Right.
Right.
We'll talk about that.
Okay, good.
I just want to go back to a question I think we've probably answered in previous meetings a number of times. Is there any way that we know when this monitoring is going to end? Is there some criterion by which we know it's no longer needed, or is this just go on forever?
Good question.
I think, I didn't jump in and answer to the kind of, you were kind of leading into that as well, which is how, if the contributions are gone, how do we drive this cost down or get rid of this? It really depends on the results of the monitoring. So we can certainly petition New Hampshire DES to reconsider, but correct me if I'm wrong, it's still hitting, and they're going to want to monitor, whatever, the various chemical and compounds that are in the ground. And as long as we're getting detect hits on that, it's unlikely we'll be allowed out of that, given they want to monitor if those are moving.
I think they moved the goalposts on us at some point.
They're always moving the goalposts on us.
There are no goalposts.
Doesn't seem like it sometimes.
Have we seen any improvement year to year, or is it still pretty much flashes the same amount of?
Yeah. We have the other mechanism. Lily talked about how it was ball bearing that selected Geo Insight, which sort of put us into a contractual obligation on our cost share, but as when presumably we're outside of the scope of New Hampshire ball bearing, we could put those services at least back out to bid, and tried through that process to reduce the scope of those, but we're beholden to New Hampshire DES on that.
Yeah, if it's the same every year, can't we just wait 3 years to test it again? It's just-
Maybe we need to petition, but we've got a few years left. We certainly have an obligation professionally to try and see if we can at least reduce the scope, and that is work we'll be planning to do, for sure.
This is all a result of ball bearings' initial issue.
Yes.
So that lawsuit clearly wasn't enough to cover our costs, and it really shouldn't be costing us anything, because we didn't dump the stuff in there.
We accepted it though.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, not we, this is we. Burn your pocket.
The town accepted it and took money for it, so that was where our culpability came in.
Well, we no longer accept it.
All good?
But that's for me, Bill.
Yeah, you want to talk to my son? Okay. Right, Steph?
All right, we'll move to recycling, which I think is next in your budget. I've already read this, so move right into it. Personnel expenses, one outlier. In addition to the 2%, there was some additional monies in there. Those were salary adjustments based on what it costs to hire new employees. We were not particularly competitive and needed to extend offers that increased our salary line a little bit in order to get quality people working, and I'd say pretty happy with where we're at this point. What do you think, Darren?
Yeah.
So I think we've done good, and we're in pretty good footing. As everybody knows, there was a lot of shakeup at that center a couple of years ago, and it took a huge team effort to keep that moving. A lot of credit to Nate. Brought in Darren, all of the general services team took turns making shifts there, and it took us a while to find some people that wanted to work. It's not particularly great hours, and we were successful in doing so, but it came at a small premium to get good quality people working there. So we have 3 full-time employees, 1 part-time employee that works limited hours on Saturdays when it's very busy at the center. All right, I put an asterisk next to this massive service line increase you see, and I'm going to explain it on the next slide, so I'm going to gloss over that. But you are seeing a $49,000 increase to that, but there's a good explanation, and we're going to go through it. We've already talked a lot about electricity and how those forecasts have come up. And apparently Darren likes to keep the heat on low because the heating is going down based on consumption as well. So kudos to you for saving us $4,500 next year. All right, so and then I say pay as you throw, which is tied into the services, so let's jump ahead. So what is that? The operating services line, that you're looking at a draft budget, and that was important. We talked a lot about how to approach this subject as we got into the budget discussions, and we wanted to show you, I'll say the draft budget that you're looking at shows these things. This is what constitutes that number. There is a $30,000 increase to potentially support the pay-as-you-throw program, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. $50,000 for the demo container, which if you go to the center, you've got the blue bag container, and then you've got the demo container. That's the one on the right. It actually costs $50,000 to dispose of all those things. Of course, we take in a little bit of revenue against that, but it's a big cost. Similar to the diesel, similar to hauling charges, the costs have gone up tremendously to remove the waste from our community, and we're starting to feel that through this budget. We've done our best over the last few years to try and keep costs contained, try not to increase prices, try to keep things low. Done an okay job, but we're now into the red, and I'll get into that. So keep moving on, $1,200 or so on an annual basis for bulbs and batteries, disposal costs, $3,500 for electronics, $3,600 for scrap metals. We get some revenue back against scrap metals, but we work with a brokerage firm and we have to pay a fee for them for their services, and then it's offset, and then we make a little bit on top of that through metals. So let's talk about this $30,000. We wanted to show you what the impact would be if the community decides not to increase the price of the blue bags. We know small price increases or moderate price increases in this case to any fee, whether it's recycling fees or blue bags, tends to get people a little wound up. We don't want to do that. So we're showing as much as we can. Fact is, we're $29,000 in the hole right now in the pay-as-you-throw program, driven primarily by a fairly unexpected price increase to what it costs for us to remove that waste from. We knew this was coming at some point because fees have not been adjusted for a very, very long time. The general fund had been able to absorb that. Can't anymore. or can, assuming you want to increase the services line of the budget. So what I've thrown up here are some potential options, just to kind of lay out what it would look like, and I wanted to actually ask the budget committee. This will ultimately have to go to a public hearing if you ultimately decide, the select board wants to decide to increase pricing, but in consulting with the board members, made sense to at least throw this out. Let's figure out what might make sense for this point. We can't avoid the price increases to get the trash out of our community, but we have some mechanisms that we can look at to fund it. So right now, the current pricing on the blue bags that you buy if you use the facility are $7.50 for the 15-gallon for a roll and $15 for the 50-gallon, right? 33-gallon. 33, thank you. In order to make up that difference of the $29,000, the price increase just to get us back to break even presently would be to bring the small bags up to $11.25 and $18.75 for the large bags. So that would help us with the $29,000 hole we're already looking at. Did that, take the $29,000 out of the services line in the operating budget and don't support it with the general fund operating budget. We're anticipating another 6% increase on hauling from our provider. Just to get out in front of that question, we did research and looked for if there were other alternatives. One of the disadvantages to working in a small rural New Hampshire community is sometimes there is not a lot of competition for various services, and hauling of waste from a facility is one of those areas.
Is this all burned?
Sorry?
Is it burned, incinerated?
I don't know where it goes from MDS. I think they landfill it.
goes up to Portsmouth.
And then lastly,
One Portsmouth, yeah.
additional option would be, okay, raise to $12 and $20 would cover next year's anticipated increases for the charges. And if you wanted to go one step further as a community, raise to $13 and $21, which would cover expected price increases and also help us to put a little amount of money back into the pay-as-you-throw, which initially was set up so that any additional fees could go in this fund and could be used to repair the compactor when it needs repairs and things of that nature. Repair, replace, and otherwise. Yes, sir.
You say currently $7.50 and $15, that's per bundle.
Yeah, it's a roll.
It's a roll of 10, right?
Right.
So $1.50 a bag right now could go up to $2.10 a bag if you're doing the big bags. If someone usually brings 2 of those big bags a week, or would we be sending people off to private refuse pickup companies by an additional 60 cents or $1.20 a week of their double bag? Who's filling
It's
those bags?
it's a minimum fee if you go to the landfill itself.
I did, because I go like once every 3 months with one big bag.
Same.
I'm that cheap. So, I don't, would we be sending people away with that? It seems like not that big of an increase after having been, 25 years without raising that price? Sorry, that's mine.
I mean, I'm going
Would
to
it have to be
piggyback on
sold?
that. So the point, I think, is to encourage recycling. And so if the price increase is a little bit harder for people to handle, I mean, Tyler just said he brings one bag every, I think that maybe we'll pay a little bit, myself, will pay a little bit more attention to what goes in the blue bag and make sure I'm composting more, make sure I'm recycling more, and there's less that goes in the bag, I have to buy less bags. Maybe that's not helping our revenue problem, but.
But I think the other side of it is, at what price would you just hire Monadnock Disposal?
Sure.
You know what I mean, like that
More than
was
60
the other side of
It was, yeah.
Tyler's comment is,
Individuals, right.
but then we would have less to haul, right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
Do we know what those charges are for MDS to come around, pick up? Is that as well?
Oh, individuals?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
They don't, did MDS do individual pickup?
Yeah, they do 55-gallon drums.
Do they?
Last I looked into it personally, it was $45, $50, $60 a month.
You know, it's a few
Don't
hundred
quote me,
bucks for
that
a
was
dumpster.
a while back. But I think
So
it's
I guess I'm unclear about what parts of recycling we're talking about here. We're just talking about the trash side, right?
Right.
We're not
Simple
talking
bags.
about the cost of figuring out what to do with aluminum and glass and all that, right?
Yeah, just the
So this
disposal.
is just,
Pay-as-you-throw with the first option sort of suggesting that if the community did not want to increase prices, that it would cost us $30,000 through general taxation to support this program.
Do we know what percentage of our community does pay as you go versus private?
we have to pay for the tags, so that must be a known number.
That's close, yeah. Then you'd have to extrapolate on multiple vehicles for different households.
Still $5 a sticker.
Right.
Doesn't matter how many.
Right.
Is it 1,200 people? How many is it that you sell?
How many
Stickers.
The math works out to about that, right?
1,200, right?
Right.
It's not a very large portion of Peterborough.
1,200 stickers.
Yeah.
That's
6,500 people.
It's households, not
That's households.
population.
Right.
But I'm saying, if you have like 1 or 2 stickers per,
Is that also
That's-
including sharing?
yes.
Yeah, they can participate.
We get one free and pay for the second?
Nope,
No.
not anymore.
That's Cunningham.
That's the pond.
All right.
Seth, do you know the rough cost of bags for other communities in the area?
I don't.
Are we the norm? Are we way too low? We don't.
Are the cost to us supplied?
No, the cost per person.
Oh, I don't know, I've never
per,
done that
resident.
analysis. I think the program is always set up to try and be as self-sustaining as possible, so our pricing has been set accordingly, but things have gone a little sideways in contracts the last 14 months.
If I can offer, if I can. For Milford, Wilton, you don't pay per bag.
Jeffrey is neither. Jeffrey's is all general funded, pretty much.
Just to
You
throw
don't
that
pay for a
out.
sticker. Okay.
We don't have stickers in Wilton, and that's Wilton, Lineborough. Milford, same thing. You go to the canyon, you put general trash.
Zero.
Zero.
Yeah, you're only paying for, the microwaves, the fridges, stuff like that, mattresses.
Well, you pay for it in your taxes, whether you use it.
Right, it's coming out of
as-
general fund, right, exactly.
But it's less
Yeah,
visible.
Leslie, did you have another question?
Those also aren't award-winning recycling facilities.
No.
Yeah. And it's pretty. Gets awards for that too.
Go ahead, Leslie.
So the highest cost puts 75K in our pocket, whatever it is.
Oh, I just wanted to put some scenarios up here.
No, but all I'm saying is, if the second scenario covers this year's price, if we raise it to 21 and that gives us 7,200 annually, that's not accounting for the fact that we're probably gonna have an increase
Right.
the following year. So all we're doing is saying, we're not gonna raise the bag price again for 2 years.
Right.
That's pretty much all we're guaranteeing.
It does seem like not a very sustainable contract situation presently.
Now, the increase by small versus large, I mean, it's a lot, the increase is a lot smaller for the large bags in your scenarios. Was there anything driving that decision?
I took the same, I didn't try to do a weighted average or a weighted fee against it. I took, for the illustrative purposes, the difference that needed to be made up and applied it to both. So it's a straight one.
Yeah, it looks like, just dollars.
Right.
Right.
So, again, this is more, maybe higher level philosophical discussion tonight, and depending on
Yeah.
favorite preference, there could be a lot more options that are explored as well. And engaging the one.
I hope that was the machine.
Good news, it's not the work guys are already all here.
Go ahead, Bob.
You asked for direction as a member, I'll just give you, I think when you say $2.10 a bag instead of saying $1.50 a bag, it's a little more convincing and it's a little bit hard to argue against, and I would say, I would think that's a good idea. I would also say that the $5 we pay for a tag is way too low. It's always shocked me when I go in there and offer them money that they only take a $5 bill.
And he has a heck of a time getting some people to pay it. so.
Yeah, it's hard to.
Yeah, I know people will complain, but I take out more than that out of the mini mall every week.
I don't believe that.
Bill, you need to comment?
Yeah, I've given some thought to this, and I feel that we should establish an increase every year as required. So we should address our current issue, and then next year budget for an increase in pay. I think people will accept it better, rather than hitting them with a big charge up front. That's my opinion.
All right, so to understand, are you suggesting supporting the program with the general fund for FY25?
No, I'm
Okay.
suggesting a price increase on the
Okay,
bill.
got it, thanks.
But then just building a % increase into the budget every year.
Right. It'll be small enough that people will barely notice it. Everything else has gone up tremendously. And I agree with Mandy, I think it'll encourage recycling.
But I was thinking Carl's right, like, I think we should also have a increase, some kind of scheduled increase at some time increment for the stickers.
There's a lot of benefit other than the blue bags.
Yeah.
Well, it's just being a good citizen. I would also suggest maybe phasing in that increase, not going whole hog, maybe let the general fund pick up part of it this year and, you know, and then phase it in going forward next years, because it's a pretty big increase in 1 year. That would be my thought.
I hate to put it in the general fund when it penalizes people who don't use the recycling center. I mean, that's the whole point of the pay-as-you-throw program.
It's 50 cents a bag.
Can use it.
Yeah, it's a municipal necessity that I think the community should support, because, you know, we're gonna do all that junk.
I went back to one of the slides because I did gloss over something that I didn't want to gloss over, which is, we know we've got to do a full fee analysis of the recycling center. We're recognizing the model is sort of leaking at this point, and it needs some work. So not only are we looking at standard operating procedures, which I put on the end, so that we can hopefully, as we hopefully don't have any more, but if and when we have turnover, we can sort of make it a turnkey style job, which we didn't have when it changed over last time. It's something we're working on presently. The fees are something that we really need to work on and something we're going to be digging into over this, probably the remainder of this winter going into next year.
Is this something that the recycling advisory committee could help you out with?
Possibly. I mean, I think it's fairly simple math on our end to figure out how much it costs to dispose and how much labor time is involved with an item, and then make some series of recommendations.
And they could do the legwork of evaluating adjacent communities and their cost structures and so on.
Possibly.
And then certainly the marketing of the need to recycle.
Yeah,
Save the trash
that's
bag.
That's definitely a big one.
Mary, did you have a question?
That was
Sorry.
Bill.
Okay.
Covered that, thank you.
Any other questions? I just had one other quickie, apart from the pay-as-you-go. Are we making any headway getting rid of other recyclables that we're supposedly recycling, but we've had to throw out because, you know, paper cost or glass cost? Has that improved? Has that situation improved?
The revenue situation?
As far as recycling more, that I know we've been building
Yeah.
up less for decades.
Right.
And paper, cardboard,
Do you have a sense,
newsprint.
other than
Are we doing better or are we doing worse?
Yeah, so actually we've been going up slightly on every commodity except plastic. Plastic, number one plastic, which is the clear bottles, has been going down slightly, and same with number two, which is like milk jugs. But as far as that, paper has gone up from 0 cents to $30 per ton. Cardboard has been gone up from $35 to $100 a ton.
Is that our cost or is that our revenue that we're getting for that?
That's that would be the revenue, I believe.
Yeah, cost to dispose. Was your question more about the amount we're receiving or the money? Or both?
Well, I'm just questioning how much we are recycling, the stuff that we put in the recycling.
Percentage of the
bins every
total
year.
recycled.
Is it going up or down, is my question.
Do you have a sense for that, either of you guys?
Like how much we're taking in.
Total volume, how much is recycled versus how much is disposed?
I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, the dollars that you were
See.
mentioning, I'm still confused, the dollars you were mentioning, $0 to $30, is that what we're paying to get rid of this stuff, or that's what we're
No, that's
getting in?
that's the price per ton to sell it.
Of the
Yeah,
commodity.
yeah, that's.
So
yeah,
for
exactly.
Revenue.
cardboard is
It's revenue, that's my
Yeah,
question,
that's
thank you.
revenue.
Markets, I would say, generally remain soft, and the revenue reflects that. It fluctuates year to year, and when you look at our revenue, you'll notice certain things don't even go out because we don't receive enough of it on an annual basis.
Right.
We sit on it, we process it, it waits, try to watch markets, but you have to make a full truck, and we're not really that high of a volume facility. And so our revenue kind of does this, but it's also influenced heavily by markets as well. And at times, certain commodities have strangely doubled in price, and then the bottom falls out the bottom of them, and now we're paying to dispose of them. So it's really,
Right.
it's not really actually a very reliable revenue model. Not what it was 20 years ago, if you look back at sort of the emergence of recycling markets.
Is what you just said the reason why we have blank lines on
Yes.
many of these? Okay.
Right.
So we're holding on to some of these
Yeah.
commodities
Right.
in preparation for.
We're saying like aluminum is,
That's about 2 years to get a truckload for
Okay.
aluminum.
right.
Same for tin, correct?
Yeah, yeah, 2 years now. So.
And in terms of the data, we weren't keeping very good data until the last couple of years. One of the things we changed in the last couple of years was to dig in and start tracking this better so that we can forecast it over time. But in the absence of good, strong, reliable data prior to that, it's kind of hard to make those, more than an assumption at this point. But it is something that we do tackle now, and something we take seriously. Though I don't feel like, I shouldn't use the word feel, it appears as though recycling in general is never going to really be a lucrative thing again. That I think the heyday of that, from what we see, is gone. But there is still value in us to track what we've got and be able to anticipate as much as we can, particularly working through brokerage firms, when it makes sense to maximize a return on minimal returns.
Yeah, I still feel as good citizens, we should recycle even if it's costing us money.
Sure.
Definitely. Mary?
The other fee that, have you considered increasing for people that put into the demo dumpster?
We're going to consider all fees as we go through that process, yeah. This one is immediate, obviously, given the contract we recently received, but all fees need evaluation. And, obviously can't speak for the community, but trying to put some options out in terms of how much of it you want, and how much of you want the general fund to support versus how much should be fee-based will be likely to be some robust conversations, I'm sure.
We have like a recycling committee still operational?
Just got fired back up.
Right, so marketing these changes in a positive way will be very important.
The very first meeting is Thursday, if you're interested, it'll be over at the library. I have another really quick question. You probably need some decision as to the pay-as-you-throw pricing?
Relative to the FY25 budget, I think the only decision right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Nicole, is whether you want the general fund to support it as the draft suggests right now. And if not, we'll come back to you with a reduction, and we need to schedule a public hearing to figure out what that pricing is going to be.
I personally, the latter.
Yeah, I don't think the general fund should cover it.
Okay.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
People on the budget committee want to weigh in on that at all?
I already said that was my position.
Okay.
I would agree.
Yeah, if you guys want to discuss it and give us a...
No, I think we just discussed it now.
Yeah.
Looks like it's,
You heard it.
there's some agreement to
Well, this
your
is a good
suggestion.
opportunity to throw it out and get some feedback now,
Yeah.
and that gives us our charge in terms of what that work week needs to look like going into the public hearing when we get that scheduled. But meanwhile, the next iteration of the budget will show that reduction against supporting the pay-as-you-go. Good.
Okay, great.
So get out there and buy your bags now.
That's insider trading.
Yeah, it's like Stan.
Yeah, forever.
Now we're right back to toilet paper and paper towel.
That might not happen.
That was a $30,000 comment.
What time does show's close?
All right, so the utility division, this is enterprise fund, but we always make sure we bring this forward through the budget process as well. It's reflected in your spreadsheet. Not hitting tax bills per se, but if you're a water or sewer user, you feel these. Already mentioned, we're evaluating water and sewer enterprise fees. Don't need to look at that at this point. There'll be a lot more information coming out about that, but in the meantime, let's look at the operating outliers. So in the water division, we've got 6 full-time employees and 1 former full-time employee who's now a part-time employee who is running our cross-connection backflow program on a part-time basis. Salaries reflect same as the other budgets, with some salary adjustments again, same as I mentioned about the recycling budget. We made some hires, and we had to make a couple of decisions in terms of what we're paying them and what we're incentivizing newer employees in terms of obtaining necessary and required licensing. So in order to get good quality people working for Nate's team, we had to go up a little bit in terms of what we're paying. And you see that reflected in the budget. The overtime is down. Let's hope.
Yeah.
We'll do our best, but we try our best based on the forecast. But as you know, our budgets are dependent on forces outside of our control in many cases. So chemicals are up. You want to speak for that, Nate?
Every year the chemicals go up. It's harder to get, and the trucking, the delivery fees go up every year too. And it's not that we're using more chemicals, just the price of doing business.
This is less significant of an increase than it was last year, though.
Oh, we haven't got to sewer yet.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Withdraw the question.
Yeah. Water wells, services. If you want to take us through, Nate, go for it.
The water well services, we wanted to increase that up 5,000 because we've been spending over the 10,000 that we budget every year. everything's more expensive. And stuff is old, so.
What
it's just
happened
a-
2 years ago? Why was that such a gigantic number a couple of years ago?
2 years ago, that was.
43,000.
That was Tarbell Well that completely failed. Yeah.
We've talked about electricity and heating fuel a fair amount tonight. Sure, we want to, same logic was applied to this budget as well.
But those electricity costs are offset by the solar array, right?
Not at the wells.
Sewer,
Well, like,
no wastewater plant.
Any other water questions?
Sewer, similar, we, 2% cost of living and merit. Salary adjustments, we promoted an employee to be the chief operator of the plant, and that's reflected in the salary adjustments. And again, hiring skilled people that come at a premium required us to consider and make decisions about how to keep our plant running properly. So you see the 4%, but you see an additional salary adjustment reflected in the budget too for those considerations. There's the bigger chemical number, $35,000.
So we need to meet a lead limit of 0 going out to the river, and there's one chemical that will do it, but we've had to increase the amount that we put into the waste stream to get that number down.
You said you had to increase it, there's more lead coming in?
I think so.
Chemical
We're
has
working on
changed.
trying to figure out where it's coming from. I think it might be from the septage. We have taken in a lot more septage, which is, does help us out because we charge a decent amount and it doesn't require a whole lot of work. Like I said, we're trying to figure it out.
So it's possible septage coming from other communities that may have a lot of lead in their pipes, or?
You're definitely gonna have a lot of lead in your septage because,
It's private septic tanks.
Right.
We're talking about.
Oh.
and because the metals are gonna settle out in the tank, and then the clean liquid's gonna go out to your leach field, once they pump that tank out, it's gonna be high in copper and lead.
Also, private water supplies can have significantly more
Right.
lead.
Yep.
The strange part is you're allowed, there's some amounts of lead that you're allowed to have in public drinking water supply,
Correct.
but to get rid of it, it's lower,
Yep.
which is always strange to me.
The wastewater effluent meets a higher standard than drinking water does.
Yes.
They're saying that
Create our own drinking water.
Well,
That is changing, like I said about the lead inventory earlier tonight. We are heading in the direction where the drinking water will be at a very, very low. You can see where this is heading, starting with an inventory, and then it's a remediation plan, likely led by the municipality, although we don't know what that financial mechanism is really gonna look like at this point, as mandated by the EPA. Let's hope there's some money attached to it.
I'm afraid to ask this, but what's our useful life expectancy on our sewage treatment plant? Is there a year number that we deal with?
They typically say 25 to 30 years, but with the SBRs, it's just a concrete tank, so as long as the tank is structurally sound, the equipment that goes inside it could be refurbished. And then if we need to increase capacity, we could add one more tank, or 2 more tanks, whatever we need.
When did it go online?
2012.
Glad I asked that question, I feel better.
But we do a lot of maintenance and we replace stuff as needed, so I'd like to think that it would last a long time.
we're wastewater treatment operator of the year after all, so.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thanks.
Peterborough also has a legacy of holding on to buildings for a very, very long time. Go back to slide 1 if we want to talk about one of the projects we're working on right now. But no, the plant's immaculate. If you have a chance to tour it, many of you have seen it. Our liaison, Al's not here tonight, but we actually met at the plant. He took a tour, we went through the budget, and he was very, very intrigued to check it out and was very complimentary, but it keeps the place spotless. As does Tim at the highway garage. You should have seen it before Tim took over there versus what it looks like now. It's immaculate. It's an old building, but it's incredible how clean. What's the age on that thing?
71.
71. It's in, it needs love. I mean, we're gonna put the work into it, as we talked about, but it's in good shape. It's a testament to the staff.
And if anyone does want a tour, stop by anytime when we're there. We'll stop what we're doing, walk you through.
She wants to be on the budget committee.
All right.
The dog?
A few other outliers in the budget. Supplies up 3,700. Same logic as last time. Price of doing business. We've seen those reserved that we have to buy the things we need in order to meet the effluent level and keep the plant in good shape. And we try to do it responsibly, and we try to put forward a responsible budget that shows the cost of doing business there, and we're projecting it to go up. Equipment and tools, same thing. No particular planned expenses there, just forecasted numbers and doing our best to put a responsible budget together. We've talked about electricity, and then the sewer treatment plant services. No particular, just absorbing additional price increases for the services that we require to keep the plant in good shape.
Any other questions or comments or concerns about sewers? About
All right.
anything?
A couple outliers in the revenue. DPW is not a big revenue generator for the town, but we have a few things. We touched a little bit already about recycling revenue. We're projecting, I'll start from the bottom because we already talked about it today, but we project it to be down, but those are very conservative estimates. We're going to work our best to try and beat those. But again, not all commodities go out every year. The markets are not particularly strong on certain commodities, so we're sort of beholden to forces that we have very little control over outside of recycling more and disposing less, which is something that we can be working on.
Seth, what happens to the glass? You was it last year that you purchased the crusher?
Yeah, 2 years ago at this point, right?
Yep.
Go ahead, Darren.
So, do you want to explain?
Well, so far we've been crushing all the glass that has been built up over 20 years in the back of our facility. Currently, right now, we're about, I'd say,
Halfway done.
Yeah. Eventually, what we're gonna turn it into,
Yeah, in order to make it, or in order for it to be a usable product, it has to be 1 inch minus. We thought that the crusher bucket would do it. It looked like it did when it first started. It gets most of it to 1 inch minus. So we're gonna have to rent a trommel or have someone come in and screen that, get the 1 inch minus so we can use it, and then re-crush the stuff that isn't 1 inch minus.
Will you screen it?
Yeah.
And what's the eventual use? Or
Then it can be used, Tim can use it for road base.
It can be used for fill, primarily road base. We've got some in-house use for it on some of our utility access roads, which are dirt. We can use it as a base there. You gotta cover it, and we're driving all over glass.
so this isn't a revenue source?
Potentially. I mean, we can certainly, it might even be something that we choose to give away, that contractors and others could use, but potentially we could sell it. But there's a cost to us in keeping it sitting, and, it depends on what is the philosophy of we wrestle with what is the philosophy. Is it to make money or keep costs low, or is it to reuse? It's depending on who you talk to, it's different, So if the community ultimately decides they want to just give it away, I'm sure contractors would use it, people building roads would use it, we can use some of it. If we assign a monetary value to it, maybe we can get a little bit out of it.
Have we tried to use any of it yet for roads?
No, they're halfway through crushing what was a huge mountain of glass. And once that's processed, we've got to reprocess it, we've got to get some of the debris out of it, we've got to make sure it meets, it was
1 inch minus.
1 inch minus, meaning pieces that are 1 inch or less, and then it can be used. And I don't know what percentage we think we can get rid of. If we ever close another lagoon, we can get rid of all of it.
Probably, yeah.
If we have one utility access road that could use up a lot of it, I would think. So we have good use for it. There's good reason to crush it. Ultimately, not when we go to repair a road that we're going to do in a few years, not have to buy additional fill materials at that point. So.
Is there a cost in here for that second
Not yet.
shifting yet? That's not in this year's budget?
We're chipping away at the pile at this point.
So
if the budget,
a year out
if the
before we go through it again?
Yeah, if the minimal amount of discretionary money we have in the budget can support it, we'll try to get that done, but otherwise we'll be budgeting for it in a future year.
We don't have any idea what the cost is to rent that thing yet?
Just working on reducing the pile down to something that's at least closer to usable.
Sure.
It's been there 20 years, it can wait.
Turn it back into sand.
All right.
I do have a question. So 2 years to fill up an aluminum truck. Are there smaller vendors, like small businesses that use aluminum as a material that could be?
We make a lot of money on the aluminum.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's worth waiting 2
Yeah.
years. to-
Oh,
It
yeah,
just takes us a
definitely
long
is.
time.
Yeah.
I think the last time aluminum went out as a full load, it was 35,000. Once we can make that full truck back to the town. In that range, 35, 36,000, right?
Yeah.
So, does help to defray some costs.
Well, I think that speaks to the recycling committee and what we're talking about. I think that community education of letting people know that cans actually are something that we can sell. Like, how many people do all of us know that there's still put cans in their garbage?
Right.
We all know people who do it. Like, if we can educate the town and like really make a campaign around it, I think that
Oh,
we
that's
might see
definitely
an increase in, like Nicole said, buy cans, not bottles.
And the use of aluminum versus glass is to a benefit of the town.
Yeah.
Glass, as you've seen, it piles up over time. It's really not particularly recyclable, and then we actually have to process it numerous times to get it down to something that's almost usable and may not even have a value. So aluminum would be a great.
Exactly, I've heard the tales of the year that we asked people to reduce their water, and it reduced it so low that we almost couldn't afford to run the system anymore. So I think our town is very responsive when we ask them to do things, so maybe we educate them.
With all the plastic bags we're turning into benches.
Exactly, so, yeah.
So there were a couple outliers in the revenue. One was a mistake. We caught in the final sort of third review. We go over these budgets over and over again, and this one is we have a shared plowing situation between the depot merchants and the town. And every year there was about $19,720 as a revenue. Totally missed it, but it'll go. You'll see it reflected on the updated revenue. It's going back in. We aren't losing that revenue. We do perform the bidding services and the management of that contract, and then we bill the vendors for their portion as a percentage of the land mass that's being plowed. So that's going back in. A couple just notable outliers. You may recall in the current budget there was a considerable downtown TIF contribution for downtown enhancements. There was some planning there, but also benches, racks, things of that sort that Danica was working on. It sort of fit into the public works budget, so that's where it went, but it's more of a Danica project. So that's come out. That's why you're seeing the big drop off, 93,000. And then in years prior, we had offset portions of the general fund through the use of the West Peterborough TIF for winter maintenance, park maintenance, and street light, and that's reflected back in the budget this year as a revenue line. That is also done on a percentage of our costs based on the land mass within the TIF. And that is something that had been established many years, and I think that's gone through the approval process at this point, so it's back in the budget to help out a little bit. And again, we've already talked about the recycling revenues, which again are conservative, and we'll do our best to beat them, but I think it's foolish on business level to rely on them at this point because they are very volatile.
So that 330K that we're losing out of the revenue, that doesn't show up anywhere else, essentially?
The 330K what? Sorry.
As far as your Department of Public Works revenues, we were down 350,000, and the 20,000 you said is going back in, so that's $330,000 that the Department of Public Works revenues is losing this year.
Correct. That's a lot of that is the TIF fund.
It was TIF funding, yeah.
Right.
I think you're talking about the West Peterborough infrastructure project?
Is it showing, I'm just asking if it's showing up anywhere else, or that's just a hit for the budget?
As you saw, the TIF projects are also not in the expenditure budget.
Yeah.
So they've been removed from the revenue budget because they're a one-to-one match. And there'll be warrant articles to support any TIF project work, where it would be a warrant article to raise and appropriate a certain amount of money with the full offset being from the TIF revenues that have already been collected. Those projects were all in the CIP presentations that Leandra brought to us.
Right.
And you'll see them as warrant articles.
Yeah, I mean, you really highlight the reason why we're setting up these warrant articles, because it looks huge when you see money going in and then the money dropping out the following year. There are expenses that really shouldn't be in an operating budget because they're not operating, they're special projects. So by creating expendable trust funds for the TIF revenues, we'll be able to sweep, essentially every year at town meeting, we'll be sweeping the funds into those expendable trust funds, and then the selectmen will be able to expend on projects throughout the year as needed.
Other questions or comments?
So are we gonna drop those as line items in this budget afterwards?
For the most part,
They're
yes.
not
there's
in this
gonna-
budget.
They're not in this
there
budget.
now,
Right.
well, but they're line items.
They were previous year expenditures, so
Yeah,
if
we
there's
can't get rid of
anything
them.
with zero in every single year, yeah, I'll remove those. I think there's 2 of them.
But we haven't decided, at least the advisory committees have decided on GD, or TIF funding for fiscal 20.
Well, this isn't about funding. This isn't funding really at all. It's just where are we putting the money?
Right, no, I understand.
All set? Well, let's talk about capital then, which has some TIF. I'm going to have a much more brief roadway systems upgrade. And we'll talk a little bit sidewalk capital reserve. Tim can talk about what's in the fleet capital reserve, and then the bridges, dams, and culverts, which is also CIP and TIF funded. So years past, they got about 30 slides for this, but we're down to 1. I think people are familiar at this point. So we presented to the CIP in the fall. We continue to make progress on our 10-year plan. We've increased our rating from beginning point of 2017 at 70.45 on a scale of 0 to 100 through the combination operating budget and the additional monies that come through the CIP and warrant article ballot process. We've picked up more than 10 points, so we've gone from call it a 70 to an 81 over that period of time. And many of you live on roads that you've seen resurfaced or travel them every day, and it's really been a great investment in this town, and I think it's worked out really well. So in addition to continuing to make progress, we've also been saving, as we talk about every year, because we got Pine Street, which is going to be an expensive project, and then we get right into Grove Street, Main Street, Elm Street, Summer Street in the next couple of years. So been also trying to put away some of that money for some heavier paving projects in the downtown. This coming year, I didn't put it on the other projects list, I don't think, but planning to reevaluate the entire program as we're sort of rounding the final corner on it and make some recommendations as to what additional capital maybe should look like going forward after this program sort of completes. We'll have completed all the roads that we laid out to do that had fallen into disrepair, and we'll make some recommendations in the coming year about what maybe that looks like, probably leading into the fall through the CIP process. So just for folks that are not aware, we have, I think I have those backwards actually, it's $450,000 in the operating budget, which helps us to maintain roadways, roads that are in good shape, and the special request every year that goes through ballot the last couple of years, but previously town meeting, is for an additional $400,000, which allows us to do heavier, more expensive projects. We started in the rural sections of town based on rating and have worked our way in. In order to determine these ratings, we contracted with an engineering firm to help us understand how to put together what's called an RSR, a road service rating. And then we evaluate the entire road network based on the condition of each one of the roads. And then once they're in the database, we update a percentage of those every year. And then the database sort of assigns a degradation, so our numbers stay hopefully relatively accurate as we go through. So we've been able to keep making progress through the investment of the community.
That Pine Street project, do you have a clear vision of what that's going to be now, when, and the culvert thing to be part of it now?
Do you live on Pine Street now, right?
I'm asking for Bill Kania.
Yeah. They flipped the coin on who was gonna ask.
Pine Street, we're planning Pine Street for this spring in this current budget with the money we have available. So we're engaging with a civil firm where some concerns about the level of work that needs to happen on that in terms of coordinating the construction efforts. It's looking like it's gonna be a dual project between contractors and Tim's staff. Tim's staff will be doing some of the work, help us defray some of the cost. And I'll talk about that in a second. We're going to use some of the sidewalk money that goes to the CIP to support the Pine Street sidewalk. And we're going to use the heavy paving monies to resurface and take care of a couple other curbings and other considerations on the roadway. But doing a little bit outside planning to get our bid docs together. Actually have a meeting next week with Civil to talk about how to put that program together and get it out to bid here, hopefully in the next probably 2 months or so.
And is that culvert still part of the plan, or that's going to be?
Culvert needs a lot more planning at this point.
That's
Still just sort of
part of
placeholder, and it's out right now, years beyond this. We'll resurface and get our work done. We can come back once we evaluate all options, because our goal on that one is to drive that cost down to something a little bit more manageable.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Pine Street will be closed for a year, you said?
Just a year?
Yep.
I don't think it'll be closed at all, but there'll be one lane for a considerable period of time, that's for sure.
Yeah, we're working. Pine Street will be worked one lane at a time.
Yeah. So we'll keep it open.
Bill and I will volunteer to be flagmen if you need any.
We'll need you for after it's paved, for when people are speeding and everybody's complaining about that instead of the bumps.
I look forward to getting it done. Took my kids trick-or-treating there this year, last couple of years. It's in tough shape, and it's one of the last ones. It's not as easy as these railroads. Those are easier projects for us. Grinding up pavement, putting pavement back is not the same as all the considerations and utilities that are connected to Pine Street and the downtown. So we have experience doing those projects, but the cost is considerably more to do so, and the planning is particularly on a hill facing a very expensive bridge that we had retaining wall we just rebuilt. We don't want to lose the whole road during construction, so it has to be phased properly. Heavy rain event on that road, if it were dirt, could potentially be a major problem for this community. So we taking it through a little bit more cautious planning process on Pine Street.
Are you doing the whole Pine Street, or are you?
We already done the backside of it.
That's all done. So it's
That
just
doesn't
the
have
front
all
side?
the utilities and sidewalk this side, and it doesn't have the steep slope.
So just got the
facing.
chaining.
Yep.
Pull out all the lead pipes while you're in there.
We're taking a look at them while we're there.
Exactly.
Just a sampling of the last couple of years of work that work has funded. The blue box represents the monies that we're talking about through the CIP, and the green boxes, and a lot of other work that I don't list up here that Tim uses and we use to maintain our road network. But the blue box is for the purpose of the monies that go through ballot and or town meeting ballot last couple of years. So a lot of work over the last 2 years. So the amount of work we've been able to accomplish is obviously the direct result with the amount of investment the community's been willing to make in the roadway network, and I personally believe that we've got some of the better roads in the state. Personally, I mean everywhere. I travel a lot for my other job, and we got a really good year, so appreciate the investment. $35,000 for sidewalks. I mentioned earlier that line item used to look like $55,000, but we reduced it down by $20,000. But we need to leave some money in there for sidewalk work. That went through the CIP process. That's actually Tim's team out there doing.
Well, that's McDowell.
That's McDowell, probably in front of Al's house if he's watching. So not quite. It might be Ronnie right there. But that's Tim's team, and that's the level of work we're probably looking at for them to do on Pine Street. But we still do pay for some paving services. But we do a lot of the excavation ourselves in-house, curb resetting if possible, and then sub out the remainder. But Tim's been able to help us get a lot more work done by bringing some of that lighter construction work in-house, whereas prior, all that was subbed out. So Mary, to your earlier questions, another one. That's efficiencies gained through the leadership of Tim and his guidance to his team and expectations for his team. So. Any questions about sidewalks? Pretty straightforward. It's a continuing program. I mean, normally we had been doing $20,000 with a $20,000 TIF, or 20 and 20 through the TIF and general fund. That we've moved outside of TIF work. We're into other areas now, but requesting a little bit more for Pine Street. Tim, do you want to take us through the fleet needs for FY25?
Sure. Well, first on the list is the six-wheeler replacement, and that six-wheeler is a 99. Yeah, it's a 99 International we have. It's kind of relatively the same as that 10-wheeler, but just a six-wheeler. We put a lot of money into keeping that thing up and running, and Lord knows what it's going to take to keep it going for another year.
What is a 99?
1999 International.
You're buying a 1999?
No, that's what we currently have. No, I'd like to get a 2025 if I could.
Yeah, sick of that.
That makes a lot of sense.
So that would just be just all the years of service that thing's had is pretty well beat. It's had its heyday.
And we'll sell it on municipal bid.
Or trade in. Yeah, I'm sure there's a trade in value to it as well.
We'll get 25 years out of a 2025.
If you're lucky, who knows?
Sure.
With the DEF system these days.
It doesn't snow.
The F550 pickup truck is currently a truck that the engine had blown a few years ago. It was our backup truck. We had sold that, but never put it back in the system to be replaced. At this moment, with the current truck situation that we have, we need that backup truck because as the winters are going on and something breaks down, right now we're using utilities, whole truck to plow roads as the backup. So that would be the replacement of a older 550 that never was replaced when it actually went out of service. Complete with plow and sander, just so that we are completely set up in winter. And then the F-350 is the current buildings and grounds B1 truck. It's just a regular F-350 pickup. That would be replaced with, in kind, another F-350 pickup, plow sander. That one is currently in use on winter routes. So that one is needed and is currently on its way to not being able to pass inspections this year. So that one's due.
Are there electric vehicle options for this?
Not that I've seen for plowing wise, and I can keep up with the winter operations.
That's an issue.
Plowing and running sanders.
Yeah.
It's that payload right now, from what we see, just doesn't seem to be there quite yet on electric, although we do have our, Nate's crew's got our first Lightning F-150, and in his realm, it's a lot less heavy-duty work, and there are rounds and inspections and things, so it made sense for that group, but not quite there for winter ops.
Yeah, battery capacity during the winter.
Takes it, yeah.
Sucks bad.
Yeah. All set with the fleet capital.
Is it? I read that.
Moving along. Pretty typical replacement program. We've been planning for years and years. To Tim's group's credit, they get every mile out of these trucks and then some. So they are older, but they've done a pretty good job, and we appreciate the community's investment in bringing the fleet up to speed, because a few years ago we were looking at a dozen trucks that were really way past their service life, and we're
We've
making a lot
actually
of progress.
refurbished that truck right there. It looks a lot different than it does now.
Yeah.
We use that almost every week, hauling sand, hauling gravel, hauling snow.
What's the age on that one, Tim?
That's a 98.
So that's a 98 and a relatively recent picture, just to give you an idea of how good they did.
Yeah, it doesn't look like that now. With the frame, the plow frames and towers are off of it, wheels are all redone. It looks a lot better now. But hopefully we'll get a few more years out of it, as that's a free rig at this point.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Tyler.
We have all this glass, and we have a crusher. Is there an attachment to turn, and I joked about turning it back into sand earlier, but we use a lot of sand on our roads. Do we have, how long would it take to turn that glass back into sand and then reuse it?
I have no idea, if possible.
And how much volume of glass do we have? And how much
And
volume
are
of
there any
sand?
volatile chemicals in the glass that would then be distributed to the water supply? There would be a lot of questions to ask on that one. They use dyes and other things in those, obviously, so don't know. As far as I know, I've never seen through just trade publications anyone talking about doing that, but certainly in theory seems like it might be possible. But I wouldn't know. I don't know if you guys would know how much process.
I haven't heard of anything, maybe in a mixture ratio might work, but, I mean, then you got the cost of trying to get it down to a sand particle size.
Right.
I mean, you're probably, that's a few hundred tons of sand, probably just to make it sand.
Good, just Google turn glass back into sand.
You can't unmelt it.
Tyler, you keep thinking now. That's good.
Oh, that's how big it
Carry on,
is.
sorry.
It's true. It's true. You ask the questions and sometimes you uncover something, so appreciate it. All right, hinted at some of this a little bit earlier, but in the bridges, culverts, and dams article, previously established capital reserve. We've got two coming up for FY25. This is to help us hopefully get out in front of downtown paving, which would follow hopefully the year after. So it's Pine Street, get a couple of these other bridge refurbished. So we're not replacing. Those of you who are part of the capital process, they're about halfway. Let's just synthesize it down. They're about halfway through their bridges are rated 0 to 10. Red listed bridges that are completely closed down are zeros. Right, 10's a brand new bridge. Main Street Bridge is at 10 right now. So these bridges are sitting about 5s and 6s at this point, and it's time to invest a little bit of money in them. Show some of the deficiencies here. This is the Grove Street Bridge, loose stones, revealed rebar, scouring, signs of deterioration, potholes, particularly on the Elm Street Bridge, small sinkholes. They're in need of some repair. So we've been talking about these for a couple of years. The Grove Street Bridge we've got at $480,000. So a fair amount of work needs to go into that. It has not been touched construction-wise for quite some time. Can't remember the exact last date, but it predates, it's definitely 20 years at this point since any work has been done on that. And the Elm Street Bridge community at the time, before any of us were involved, elected to go with a little bit cheaper product. It's not quite as old, but it's already showing some significant signs of wear. So with the Grove Street Bridge, $480,000 requesting full TIF offset. And with the Elm Street Bridge refurbishing, there's no TIF that could help offset that based on where it's located. And that would be $300,000, but previously had been capitalized through the bridges, dams, and culverts. So it's more of a heads up. These projects are still on the docket for FY25. Full offset, hopefully, and already capitalized. And that Old Sharon Road water main pedestrian bridge, the board might remember that Danica had come to the select board and asked to apply. We wanted to kind of get out in front of this. This is that, I didn't put a picture up, but the pedestrian bridge that has a water main suspended on it over by Noon Falls. It can still be used for pedestrian, but it was closed to travel many, many years ago. That bridge, that's a critical water main, so we do need to invest in that. We've been probably talking through the planning process on this one for 6-7 years at this point, which kicked off the establishment of the South Peter Road TIF based on a few other infrastructure projects. In any case, sadly, we were unsuccessful in getting grant monies, but we went through the full approval process and have been able to get the monies we need to start the planning and engineering process for a pretty significant project. We will be requesting full TIF offset and needed to adjust that. We're unsuccessful on grants for that ask.
Didn't we do some work on the Elm Street Bridge a few years back?
Not since I've worked here.
That was like 2002 or
That's when it was replaced.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Replaced in
I don't remember
2002, 2003, in that range. But I'm not aware of any maintenance that's happened to it beyond, minimal surface repairs done by highway.
Wait, in only 22 years, it's back to 1005?
Yeah. I think it's actually a 6, but yeah.
What should they have done instead of the construction?
I hadn't evaluated that. In talking to the person that we had hired to do the evaluation, he suggested it. It just said, I don't have that written, but he suggested it appeared to be a cheaper alternative that would have been selected at the time. But in terms of that level of detail, I don't have that right now. But thankfully, we don't have to replace it. We do need to invest in it, though. So we're assuming everything is approved, everything moves forward, and our work schedule remains the same. You will definitely at least see activity on the Elm Street Bridge in FY25. And then a couple more things, and this is the last slide. Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund CIP process FY25. We've been talking for a few years about the Cheney booster pump. If you wanted to jump in and talk about those, looks like me.
So those are the pumps that move the water from Cheney Tank up to Cunningham Tank. They're original from the 70s. They're obsolete. So we tried to rebuild one. We found out that we couldn't get a lot of parts for it, so it's time to replace them.
Is that a big project, time-wise? Is it just a matter of the cost of?
I think we can do that in-house by the pumps. There's a lot of room in there.
I mean, as far as downtime, is that a
we would do
consideration?
one pump at a time.
And then water system distribution improvements is the $30,000 that we put in through the CIP process and into the operating budget annually to give us some money to support the various bits and pieces we need when things break that I don't want to mention. But that's pipes, for the most part.
Any final questions for Seth? Go ahead.
I don't know if it would fall, I'm sure it would fall in somewhere in here, the DPW garage building. You've mentioned how nicely it's been kept up, but I know that we voted to bond a few years ago on some renovations there. Where are we at with that? And is that still something
That was the
that's
kickoff
planned?
meeting that I suggested that Tim had last week.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I
Architect
missed
and construction
We
group.
just got today the demo plans that we can start looking at and writing up how we plan to move forward with the monies that we do have, starting with, top-down approach, as you had already said, but we're there, we're working on it.
Is there a length of time that we have to use that money, or I don't remember? 5 years. 5 years, okay. Oh, look at that, I knew that there was something.
We're in good shape, and strategically, the hope is if the fire station project moves forward, that we have an opportunity to bundle services for construction management to help us with all three of the simultaneous projects that'll be happening at the same time, which will help us save some money on those outside professional fees. So we're moving through the planning process now, but if that moves forward, then we'll save some money. If not, we'll be paying for those services anyways.
Anybody else? Last chance. Seth, thank you very much.
Sure.
Excellent job.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
We have one more matter of business. We want to just approve our minutes from the 17th, I believe.
Maybe.
Disapprove.
Maybe.
Is that what you said, disapprove?
Does anyone want to comment on the minutes or make a motion to accept them?
I'll move, accept.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor? Okay, they're approved. And I think that might do it for today. Anyone else have anything before we adjourn?
I would make the motion.
Anyone second it? All those in favor?
Yeah, so that's, yeah.
Wow.